name is Tina Ruggieri. I am the assistant curator at the Abrams Engel Institute for the Visual Arts, located at the University of Alabama at Birmingham's campus. I'm excited to be here today with artist Lavaughan Jenkins. Lavaughan was born in 1976 and raised in Pensacola, Florida. He currently lives and works in Boston, Massachusetts. He graduated in 2005 with his BFA from the Massachusetts College of Art and Design. Lavaughan's works push the boundaries between painting and sculpture. His three-dimensional works, what he refers to as 3D paintings, focuses on light and color and mapping a journey for the eye across the surface of the figure. Lavaughan is the recipient of the 2019 James and Audrey Foster Prize, awarded annually by the Institute of Contemporary Art, Boston. In 2016, he was named Emerging Artist of the Year at Kingston Gallery in Boston. He is also the recipient of the 2015 Blanche E. Coleman Award, and in 2002 received the Rob Moore Grant in Painting. Lavaughan has had recent exhibitions at Abigail Ogilvy Gallery in Boston, the Painting Center in New York, Suffolk University Gallery in Boston, Oasis Gallery in Beijing, and most recently, an online exhibition at Shelter in Place Gallery in Boston. Lavaughan, thank you so much for joining me today. First, I just want to ask you how you've been doing during quarantine.
Yeah, I don't know, honestly.
Yeah.
It's day to day, but I think initially, when everything kind of got shut down, it was right after or almost during my show in New York for the Volta Art Fair. And so coming from there, anxious to get back into the studio, and then getting to Boston, and I think maybe 2 or 3 days later, they started announcing things were shutting down. And I was like, that's cool for me because I have a home studio. I was just got out of my outside studio and putting everything back into my home space. And I was like, I need privacy anyway. So this would be perfect for me. And I'll be able to just sit in my studio and work and not be bothered by the outside.
Yeah.
Right. So I was like, everyone can freak out, but this is going to be great for me. And I'm going to make so much work. And I never really thought about the idea of what comes with being forced to shut down, being forced to isolate, and the emotions and all those things started to boil, and I stopped painting. I think I didn't paint for about 2 months. So, and I think with the murder of George Floyd, maybe a week before that was my first time getting back into the studio. And since that moment, I kind of got this charge of energy, and then I couldn't stop painting.
Yeah.
You know, so I've had like 2 moments in this pandemic so far that are like night and day.
Yeah.
Where the first part made me kind of self-isolate myself even more by not even going to the studio. So now, like, it's forcing me into the studio, and it's forcing me to work and do the stuff that I'm doing now. I feel like
a lot of us have had everybody in quarantine and isolation, whether you're isolated alone or if you're isolated with friends, family, roommates, whoever. We've all had I know I've had a roller coaster of emotions. That I had kind of that first reaction, like, oh yay, I get to work from home. This is awesome. I get to be around my dogs all day and my partner all day. And then, you know, a few weeks in, I'm like, oh my gosh, I thought I was a homebody, but I actually really enjoy going to work.
Sure.
So that I feel like we all had a rage of emotions. You definitely have gotten back into your studio and have made a lot of work, and it's been really profound work, which we'll get into. I just want to kind of backtrack and just ask a little bit about your history. So how did you become interested in art, and when did you kind of decide you wanted to be an artist, or did it just kind of happen organically?
It is the weirdest story that I've ever heard from people that have become artists. I never wanted to be an artist.
Yeah.
I think my childhood, I did draw a lot, but I should say traced. I
Yeah.
traced a lot of comic books and put them in the windows and with the light going through and put paper on top and actually literally trace the figures because my brother was a pretty good, he could draw pretty good.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do whatever my brother was doing. And so that's how I kind of got into drawing. And I think as kids, naturally, you draw, you color, you do these things instinctively anyway. But that was my extent. And when I moved to Boston, I thought I was going to I wanted to study English literature. And but I thought it'd be smart to kind of take some courses at a community college, and I can kind of get to know people, get to know the city, and get familiar, and then move forward. And I took an English lit class, and I took a drawing class, and that teacher just happened to teach at Mass College of Art. And he was like, "You don't belong here. You belong in art school."
Oh, wow.
And I didn't even know art schools like existed.
Yeah.
Right. I'd never heard of an art school. And I took his painting class, I believe. And he was like, "This is going to help you put a portfolio together, and I'm going to take you to Mass Art. You're going to Mass Art." And we literally go and I talked to the administration people, and they're like, "Well, how about this? Do these projects, bring them back. If they're great, you're in. If not, we don't waste each other's time."
Oh, wow.
Right? So
Yeah.
I did the assignments, and my mentor, the man that brought me to Mass Art, Francisco, he gave me the supplies that I needed to do the projects, and I did them. We brought them back, and they were like, "See you in September."
Oh.
They're in art school. So I literally called my mom. I was like, "I'm going to art school." And she's like, "What?" And I was like, "I don't really know what's happening, but these people think I have something and it's worth exploring. So I'm going to art school."
That's amazing. I mean, that is amazing because this professor saw something in you and completely changed the direction of your life.
He changed everything, and I always tell him that, man, everything that's happening now could not be happening if he didn't, whatever he saw and whatever our connection was, you know, if he didn't decide to make that his business to help me move forward in life, you know, who knows what I'd be doing. I'm almost 100% sure I wouldn't be making art.
Yeah.
You know,
that's amazing.
that
I love stories like that.
So yeah, so that's how I got into school, and it was really hard, and you know, by like having to play catch up with everyone that's been making art their whole life.
Yeah.
And they know all these things about. I didn't know what charcoal was, besides like, you know, the stuff that you grill with.
Yeah.
And newsprint, and I was like, you can't draw a newspaper, it's already stuff there. And you know, so learning like literally like everything in school, where everyone has been doing this throughout their high school and some middle school, you know. And so there was this thing of having to catch up and doing projects 2 or 3 times over to make sure that I was learning while I was doing, but also presenting something really cool for the class when it was time to show our work. And I don't think I ever really knew I was like gonna be an artist, even when I had shows and stuff. I don't think it wasn't until myself and Abigail Ogilvy Gallery, we did spring break art fair in New York. Maybe, was it 2 years ago? I don't even remember. Everything's such a blur. I think it was 2 years ago. And hanging that show and watching the response because like New York is like New York.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's like, oh, like if you're gonna be an artist, you need to go to New York, and like if you can make it in New York, then like you're, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And so there was always this fantasy of like wanting to see what my work would do or how it would be received on a bigger stage.
Yeah.
And the nods that I was onto something from those artists that I really admire, Derek Adams, and I got to meet Michelin Thomas.
Oh wow!
And they're like, "This is cool," and I was like, "What?" Like, you know, but the overwhelming love that I got from all the visitors and other artists that were there, that was really awesome, and that kind of made me feel like I was definitely on the right path, and I was definitely supposed to be an artist. And like, I think inside, you always think, whatever you're doing, it's like you obviously believe in it.
Yeah.
But it does feel great when others agree.
Of course,
you know? And so that show, that moment with all the people that I was like really looking up to, it was really awesome. And I was like, that was the moment where I was like, I'm definitely supposed to be an artist.
You're on the right path now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, and there's other moments, but that was, you know, and I'll say this as well, like that definitely, like the financial support was overwhelming as well. Because what I do, I mean, I use oil paint.
Yeah.
So my figures, they cost a lot to make.
Yeah.
And I put in as much as I can with the work. And so the financial aspect of it is really big for me, because if I don't have the money, I can't make the art.
Yeah.
So so my bank account is like, it's an art bank account.
Yeah.
It's not for anything else. Everything that I make, I put back into art for the most part, you know?
Yeah.
And so people loving my work or appreciating my work enough to pay for it gets me that much more pumped and excited to go back in the studio and keep making work, because it's a moment where I get to share, and I keep continuing to be able to do the thing that I love to do, which is paint.
Yeah. And it's also a personal thing. It's and I feel like a lot of your work comes from a very personal place in your heart. And so when people are collecting and buying and like a little piece of you and it's, going out into the world, and that has to be, I can't even imagine what that feels like, honestly, because I'm not an artist. I study art, but I can't imagine what that might feel like to let a little piece of you go out into the world, to be in someone else's home, and what that kind of validation and that gives you as an artist.
Sure, I think at least for me, I remember the first piece of art that I sold, and I couldn't believe that they wanted to buy it.
Yeah.
And I was just like, really? And I think Digital was just being very supportive, I think, is what he was doing. I see his daughter a lot now, and we're friends on social media and things like that. And it's like he still talks about the piece, and I'm like, that's so crazy, because I always think about him.
Yeah.
And but it was really hard to give that piece away, but for someone to say that it means so much to them, that makes it easier, So after that, I don't really think about like my connection to it. It's like my chance to share my story, my community story, my culture with someone else.
Yeah.
So and I'm giving it to you.
Yeah.
It's not like you're taking it, or how society and these things. And
exactly.
I don't do a lot of the political things, but that's one of those moments where a lot of people's culture is not shared. It's stolen, I guess you can say.
That's very true, especially in art history.
So I get to actually share these things with you. I have a connection with you. I talk to you for the most part of the people that buy my work, and I get to see you, and I'm sharing this moment with you. So I think it doesn't, I don't have that I'm gonna miss you
Yeah. Yeah.
moment anymore. You know, it's like I'm sharing this with someone, but I'm also gonna now be able to afford to make more
Yeah.
and continue to share and that thing. So the more that that give and take thing happens,
Yeah.
more of this moment, this message, this my life gets out there, which is
Yeah.
I think is pretty cool.
That is awesome. And every time someone sees that piece in that person's home and they ask about it or whatever the case may be, then they tell your story through that piece at each time.
Sure, absolutely.
So a lot of your work was kind of two-dimensional before. I know some of your earlier work was more two-dimensional. You even have the two-dimensional paintings that we can see kind of behind you. Can you discuss how you started to create these three-dimensional, as you refer to them as paintings, and
Sure.
what are some of those influences in your work?
Sure. Well, I can tell you the story. It's also like I have a lot of dreams about art and artists.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of artists that have passed
Mm-hmm.
come and have conversations with me. It's kind of weird. But in particular, 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago now, but I think maybe it was 4 years ago, three and a half, something around there. I was doing a lot of two dimensional. I just had a big show of all 2D work on paper, and I sold quite a few of them. So I'm always thinking of what's next.
Yeah.
And one night, I'm dreaming, and I'm dreaming that I'm in my studio working,
Mm-hmm.
and I knock on my little tiny studio. I get a knock on the door and I open the door, and it's Philip Guston, and I'm just like, Philip, like, cause like, why are you here? Like, what is this? And he's like, you want to crit? And I was like, of course I do.
Yeah.
And mind you, I never really looked at his work.
Mm-hmm.
I knew of his work, and I never got to meet him or anything like that. So it was really weird. It's like, why are you in my studio and we
Yeah.
don't even like know each other, you know? And he was like, well, you know, I want to give you a credit and help you move forward,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so he's walking around my space, smoking a cigarette, talking about his work and how amazing he is and how we are similar
Mm-hmm.
in some ways. And I could really benefit by looking at his work more thoroughly. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. And he's like, but for you, he's like, your borders stop you. And he's like, as an artist, what you want is to never stop painting. You
Mm-hmm.
want to paint forever. And he's like, and that's what the edges of things do, especially for you. So you have to figure out a way how to eliminate your edges.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I think what you need to do is become three-dimensional. And he's like, literally rip your paintings off the paper and put them into your real space.
Oh, wow.
And he's like, you have to figure that out. He's like, I'm not here to tell you that, but I'm here to tell you that's where you need to move.
Mm-hmm.
And and when you do that, your paintings are good now, but they'll become really good when you decide to go three-dimensional. And so that's been my journey
Yeah.
these last few years, is trying to figure out how to make what I was doing in 2D
Mm-hmm.
to make it in 3D. And each year I handle the paint a little better.
Mm-hmm.
Size changes, things where the more I do it, the better I become at it.
Yeah.
And the more I get of understanding just how I can relate my 2D work to my 3D work. And now they're pretty close to being spot on with what I was doing in the 2D realm in the
Yeah.
3D. And that's really exciting. So like, yeah, this whole thing is because of Philip Guston. So I always tell
I love
people,
it.
anyone that has an issue with me calling them three-dimensional paintings or me going from 2D to 3D, I'm like, just go blame Philip. Don't yell at me. Don't complain to me. Go tell Philip because he did it. But I mean, even in school, I always saw works here in Boston, like Sargent. Um, the Manet painting of the Execution of Maximilian is another one. The sketchy painting, not the finished type paintings, which I love those, but the one here at the MFA here in Boston, I can walk through that painting all the time, and I was just like, I don't understand why I can't.
Yeah.
Like that should be something that everyone should be thinking about. And I found that it was an opportunity for me to make my own little place in the art world.
Yeah.
It's like I'm literally trying to make three-dimensional paintings that you can walk around and move around and see from all angles.
Yeah, it's incredible what you do with these figures. And so before we get further along, can you just discuss kind of your process in these? Because like how you build them up, is it all
Sure.
just oil paint, or
Yeah.
I know you said you use foam and molding paste, but like how many layers, because they're so visceral and tactile?
Right. So I was trying to make them out of all paint. The first ones I made were about 95% oil paint, which is really expensive.
Yeah.
So I learned a really expensive lesson. That but I wanted, the idea is that I'm a painter. And if I'm going to make a 3D piece, it should be out of paint. I shouldn't change the medium and things like that. So I was like, oh, I'm going to build this figure out of paint. And I did this show, and not many people were that crazy over them. They were kind of really cool things to look at. And so it didn't sell at all. And I was like, I don't know if like they're too expensive or they're just really bad paintings, or like people don't like sculptures or whatever. All this stuff is going through my head.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't stop. I have to figure it out.
Yeah.
And back to the dream for Philip. When those moments happen, I really think they are for a reason.
Yeah.
And I'm obligated to see it through.
Yeah.
So I knew I wasn't going to give up on the idea. But I thought I need to figure out a way that it's not breaking me financially to do this, because I didn't have any grants or anything. So everything that I made at my job, I was basically just taking. I work in the bar, and that paycheck goes to the bills, and then everything else goes to paint.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about what I could fill the figure with, so I could use less paint.
Yeah.
And so carving figures out of foam, the spray foam, that blue, big, thick industrial foam.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Using that, and then actually covering it with modeling paste, which is just sticking gesso. So it's the same process for me building a canvas. I just use foam as a canvas and then coat it. So I started building the figure more so with that, and then adding the oil paint to the figure. And I was able to cut the cost almost in half.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So that meant, not that I would save that money.
Yeah.
Now that meant I could make more.
Yeah.
So instead of 20, I made 40.
Yeah.
And things like that. So, but there are, I don't know exactly how many layers of paint I'm using. Yeah. But I can still tell you there's still probably about in certain areas there could be up to a half an inch thick.
Oh, wow.
With paint.
Yeah.
Typically the arms and things like on this figure you're showing now, that those arms are just me literally squeezing out of the tube.
Oh, I love
like
it.
I just took it, and that the arms came from one of my other mentors, Sam Messer. I didn't have arms on the figures, and he was like, "What's wrong with you?" It's like, how are they going to fight for themselves? if
Yeah.
they don't have arms, you know?
Yeah.
And he's like, that's one thing you can't take away uh, from them. Like they deserve to have arms to fight.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, they're my figures, and I can do what I want. And he was like, put some arms on them, and I did. But he's like,
Yeah.
put some arms on them, and call me when you post it and tell me what people say.
Yeah.
And instantly, everyone was like, there's so much power. And those are because I do anything anyone says, I'm willing to listen.
Yeah.
And I don't have anything to lose. If the arms didn't work, then I just take them back off.
Yeah. I mean,
It's
it's
just
worth
paint.
trying when someone suggests something,
Sure,
and
you
then
know, and
you find out if it works for you within your practice.
yeah, and I mean, and I consider him a friend, and
Yeah.
so I'm like, there's no reason for him to say something wrong to do it. But also, it's at the end, it's your work, so you get to do what you want. But my ears are always open to new ideas and new things. I mean, if I listen to a a, a ghost in my dream, I could listen to someone that's really tangible in my life. You
Very good point, Lavaughan. That's a very
you
good
know,
point.
so but moments like that, yeah. But and this one, I think that one probably goes in an inch deep on the belly for the amount of paint that's there, and getting into these patterns and
yeah.
things like that. Sometimes I don't know how much paint a figure gets until they get it.
Yeah. And I
You
have
know,
noticed it does vary. Like there's some that are a little bit more minimal and some are
mm-hmm.
extremely thick. Some of your more recent ones seem to be even more have more layers than
Sure,
some of your past
yeah,
ones.
yeah.
And so
That's just
I
they
know it
gained a
will
little weight in
definitely vary.
quarantine.
uh, so like all the work we're looking at today has been made in 2020, so this year.
Right.
You have titles such as like the one on the screen, how many times. You have one that's
Mm-hmm.
called Wake Up Everybody, as well as
Yep.
like the placement of the figures. Some are kneeling, some
Mm-hmm.
have their arms up like this one, which seem to me to be clear references to our current climate. Can you discuss
Yeah.
this idea further and why you've chosen to address these issues within this body?
Sure. I did a couple other interviews,
Mm-hmm.
and each interview, and mind you, these are all from the time that George Floyd died.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that I'm showing is in
Mm-hmm.
that span,
Yeah.
and there's probably about 20 more. So I think I did from that time to now maybe 20 or 30 pieces, and then the black figures that you showed a little later are over the last couple of weeks,
Yeah.
like maybe 3 weeks or something like that. Um, but yeah, the titles came about for these interviews that I started doing with some of the medias, um, and everyone's final question was, "So how are you going to address like today in your work?"
Yeah.
Because typically I don't. Typically I'm a black artist.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that I've lived through and experienced, I hope that I have enough talent to squeeze it out onto these figures.
Yeah.
And I leave them untitled,
Mm-hmm.
um, specifically to address that. Like
Yeah.
I am all this, all the politics, all the, all the violence, all that stuff is me,
Yeah.
and I don't feel I need to put it in words.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
That my figures would be strong enough and loud enough to speak all of that for themselves. You can ask them their questions. Your questions, not
Yeah.
me. Ask them, and they should be able to tell you. This is
Yeah.
how I felt about my work, you know. And but a lot of people asked if I was going to do any, like, put masks on any of them,
Mm-hmm.
or have them start raising their fists.
Mm-hmm.
And how would I recognize, or how would I project what's happening in this time
Mm-hmm.
in the work? And I was like, well, you're not going to get a quarantine portrait of
Yeah.
me in a face mask.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just, I don't think that's how I want to contribute to this moment.
I understand.
So I
Yeah.
didn't know what I was going to do. I was like, I'm just going to keep making my work,
Mm-hmm.
and that should be kind of like good enough,
Yeah.
you know, that I can fight through this and keep myself energized and emotionally sustained to get back in the studio and work. And that would be my, how I recognize this moment.
Yeah.
But sitting and when I really got back into working in the studio, like you suggested or you mentioned, they the figures gained some weight,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that was subconsciously, I kind of how I was addressing
Mm-hmm.
my moment, my face mask, my
Yeah.
black fist was in the additive that I'm doing to these
Mm-hmm.
figures, the color, uh,
Yeah.
intensity, and or the selectiveness of color. Because some of them have very little color, and then most of them have this insanely bright colors. And I went at it that way, and I thought, well, yeah, that's what's happening. And then one thing that's been really great about this is being able to. Usually, I'm super busy and I don't have a lot of time for family talk.
Yeah.
But this quarantine has gotten me, I think, conversationally a lot closer to my mom. Like we
That's
were pretty
wonderful.
close anyway, but now we talk like 2 or 3 times a week. Sometimes it's 5 times a week, which is,
Yeah.
I love my mom, but it can be a bit talking to family that often.
Yeah.
but
I
but
understand.
also, and as we're looking at this one, in particular, my grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
who's now 92,
Oh wow.
and so we're we're kind of got really close again, and conversation wise, I love my grandmother, but we
Yeah.
just don't talk. You know, but now this is like giving me a lot of time where I'm always at home.
Yeah.
And even though I'm busy in the studio, I have more time to really sit and talk. And we talk about music, we talk about life, especially the things that she, being 92, the amount of things she's seen, and
Yeah.
how today is like very similar to how things were in the 60s and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, um, but one of those sayings that she always would say to me about when they have these moments, these hard moments, or when I'm trying to pay all of my bills and buy paint and try to create work, and she was like, "Well, let's pray about it,"
Mm-hmm.
you know. And one conversation, I was like, "Well, Grandma, I'm almost prayed up. I don't know how many more prayers I have without having to figure out another way to address things and fight."
Mm-hmm.
So these figures, they decided to fight for me.
Yeah. That
So the
makes
titles came,
mm-hmm.
and the titles came from a lot of the music that I was listening to. A lot of the titles are songs,
Mm-hmm.
or parts of conversations that I have with my grandmother, parts with my mom,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, or just think about how I feel,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And for this one, Grandma's Hand, that was a Bill Withers song, and I made these to think about my grandmother
Mm-hmm.
kind of holding my hand through this moment and so many other moments that I went through in my life.
Yeah.
And I was like, what super way to honor her is to kind of take this moment and this positioning of these figures and be it that it's about her.
Yeah.
And I think, again, like back to George Floyd being able to call out to his mom at the end, and so many others, like our moms are are those pillars.
Yeah.
And who would you rather walk through these moments with than your mom?
Yeah.
So I thought that would be a really amazing way to kind of honor my grandmother, while she's here, not after she passes,
Yeah.
but while she's here, and kind of bring her through my art and kind of connect with people that way. And so that's kind of what's happening with these current figures. And the kneeling figures are these moments of like, how much more can I hold, or can I handle, or like that very vulnerable positioning. Um, it's kind of giving yourself completely open to all these things that are happening in your life, and but also as giving, as offering uh, support and whatever you want to do. I mean, you get into art history and gift bearers and things like that are always giving these great offerings to kings and queens and things like that. And so that's kind of what they're doing as well. It's like my moments, my stories, my emotions, all that stuff is I'm sharing all of that. So that's what these figures do. And they're, I think, even when the narrative in them changes or if they get these titles, they're always going to be about that. And that's me at the beginning of our conversation talking about Black culture. I'm also now I'm offering this to you. I want to give you and I want to educate you on how things are, but also leaving it for the younger artists that are coming up, knowing that if this is a realm that they want to dive into, I want to lay a few of those favors down for them so they can kind of go on this path as well.
That makes sense. You know, you take your influences just from your culture, you take influences from music and from fashion and from things that you're feeling. And I feel like these newer works have even more emotion in them because you have started to change the color palettes. Some of the other works I've looked at, it's almost like a single color is being used, or more muted colors. This time this one's a good example. You have all these different colors coming in. It's so much more tactile in a way. Your work is already very tactile, but these just take it to another level, and have so much more emotion. So you can really see in the work that you're processing what's happening in America right now. In the work, even if you never were to add a title to them, you can still see what you're processing in them.
Sure. Yeah. I think when I started thinking about the titles, they were literally to speak on the fact that I was having these conversations with my family.
Yeah.
Because we never the last few years have been really busy for me for work and shows and all the stuff. So and these moments I kind of take them on myself.
Yeah.
You know, and I just deal with them my way. And with this quarantine and talking to my family so much, we began to kind of deal with them together.
Yeah.
You know, so I thought, well, if I take our conversations and put them with the figures, that's kind of like what we're doing in real life.
Yeah.
So my issues and how I handle these things are in the figure, but now I get to add the words of my mom and my grandmother. You know,
that's really
and
beautiful.
so it gave more to them where I never like leaving them untitled. It's great for me, but this was one of those things. This was my face mask moment.
Yeah.
You know, and the fact that I owe so much to them, it just felt right to, particularly now, to really start including them more. Because my figure is always about my mom and my grandmother and all the women that kind of helped me get to where I am. But now I get to use some of their words, and I thought that was really important for me to find a way to continue to connect them and enhance what I'm doing and what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful way to honor the women in your life.
Yeah.
So I have a question. So I know that you take influence from women in your life, but um, the figures themselves are very abstracted. I mean, you can tell that
Mhm.
they're either a female or a male
Sure.
figure, but you never really render any specific facial features. And so my question for you is, even though you may have underlying people that they're being pulled from, do you still want
Yeah.
your viewer to come at it with their own and maybe be able to see themselves in this work or
Oh,
see a friend,
sure.
etc.?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of why they don't really have faces.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even the gender idea,
Mm-hmm.
I own a skirt,
Yeah.
you know, and I I think naturally when I start doing shows, people just it's really easy to gravitate or de- designate a race or a gender
Yeah.
to figures. If they're darker, then they must be black. If they're lighter, they must be white. You
Mm-hmm.
know, well, the first works that I was doing were based off Goya paintings,
Yeah.
and those women that he painted were Spanish women.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and people were like, oh, like is that if it's about your mom, that your mom's light skin or whatever, or like this person must be about a white person, and because from the title, and I'm like, well, Gloria painted Spanish women, so that's
Yeah.
why they the color they are, you know. But or things like that,
Mhm.
which I don't, it doesn't bother me,
Yeah.
but I do ask people to look further than what
Yeah.
they literally see. But um, I intentionally leave their faces undescribed because originally they're memories. There are these memories that I have of people, or what, like our conversation now.
Yeah.
In an hour, it's going to be a memory,
Yeah.
you know. So I'll be describing that moment a month, 2 months later.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's not so much about your face or my face.
Yeah.
It's about this conversation that we're having, and that's what I want to paint.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so when people watch this or read something about my work or whatever, you know, it that that memory, that idea continues,
Mm-hmm.
but it also changes because it's in the possession of someone else.
Yeah.
So they have the opportunity to add their 2 cents or their ideas into things, and then it grows. And the more people that see or experience them, they get to have their own connection.
Yeah. I
And
love
I
that.
want to make sure that I have room for people to add their attachments to the work. It's a
Mm-hmm.
part of why I don't really care for titles so
Yeah.
much. Is you can put your title in.
Yeah.
Again, I go back to like you can ask the figures what they think,
Mm-hmm.
and,
It's
and typically they'll tell you.
Yeah, I really love that about your work because it's fluid for the viewer. I mean, I can identify with any of the figures, and it doesn't matter that the figures may be rendered with the color black, or it may be a male figure. I could still identify with any of them that I feel a connection to, and I love the
Sure.
fluidity in the work in that way, because it's really about the human experience within the work is something that I get out of it, and so which is something that I appreciate about the work. Um, so I want to talk about your most recent show. So Shelter in Place is, you can talk a little bit about that, and then if you'll give us a little bit of insight into the work, Black America Again.
Yeah. So basically, it's that's also from a song.
Mm-hmm.
That's the artist is Common, he's a hip hop artist,
Mm-hmm.
activist, just all around, I think, pretty awesome person.
Yeah.
I don't think he's done anything to make me say differently. So, but he came out with a song. I think it was about Sandra Bland, Tamir Rice, but just kind of how this country uh, keeps repeating itself.
Yeah.
And I thought, with everything that's happening now over the last few months, it's like it's it's happening all over again.
Mm-hmm.
And that from the times with slavery to now, these moments just keep occurring,
Mm-hmm.
and it's affecting Black Americans. Like
Yeah.
it's this Black America is this uh, this idea of Black people, uh, specifically for this show, is
Mm-hmm.
the Black people that have been murdered
Mm-hmm.
by police. But then I also added in the Black trans women that have been murdered, not necessarily by police, but been murdered in general. And I think
Yeah.
this year already the number is up to 20 Black trans women,
Mm-hmm.
or trans women of color.
Yeah.
Um, and I think last year was 27. So
Yeah.
they're ahead of that number. And I thought, particularly for my work, especially my connection to women,
Mm-hmm.
that this first part of this body of work that would come out would be about them, and to make sure that they're remembered.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as my artwork uh, is held together,
Yeah.
it doesn't break apart and whatever, that as long as my work's alive, their names will be alive and their memories will be alive, because I've now attached their names to these figures, and I could kind of pay tribute to them
Mm-hmm.
that way. And that's one of those where we talk about titles,
Yeah.
like these can easily be interchanged, but I wanted to make sure that if you're going to show my work, these names are going to be there, and
Yeah.
whoever views it will be forced to see these names, and hopefully if they don't know who they are, they'll be able to Google their names and find out their stories. But they will know that they're women of color, and that they have been killed.
Mm-hmm.
That stolen lives is what I kind of refer to them as.
Yeah.
These women had their lives stolen,
They did.
and I could do my part, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to, which I'm totally fine with everyone doing the reposting and posting of things, and going out to protests, and it's awesome. I just didn't think I was doing enough.
Yeah.
But I needed to figure out how I can do more.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, from an artist, I should be making some pieces about this, and that way, when all the work is done, I'll be able to do some shows and actually sell the work and donate to causes for women.
That's wonderful.
And so I've started to list all the cities that these women have been killed in, and I have my list. And I'll try to find groups and organizations in those areas, but also the overall ACLUs and things like
Yeah.
that. I'll be contributing to them as well. But
That's
so
wonderful.
that's another part. Like, the money that I make from these isn't for me.
Yeah.
You know, it'll be them, and that's financially I can help
Mm-hmm.
change, and and not just on my social media
Yeah.
point out, which I do it a lot. And I don't know when it happened, but just one morning I woke up and I was just like, I need to do more.
To do more. Yeah. And social media definitely is helpful to some extent, but to see true change, we have to do more than social media.
Yeah.
So I understand that,
Yeah.
and I think it's important. I think the work that you're making is really important. I think it's really powerful. When I read about Black America again. It brought me to tears because there's so much emotion in it, and it's, one person can't make a difference, but if we come together, we can make a difference.
Absolutely.
And that's to me kind of what it's trying to say in a way too.
Yeah.
What I kind
absolutely, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's one of those things where we were just talking about my work being open enough to add attachment to it.
Yeah.
And I think anything that I do, that's what it is. And I mean, and today, like the people that helped me get into art weren't Black.
Yeah.
My first professor, Francisco, I mean, he's Cuban.
Yeah.
But all my faculty, for the most part, was white. And these things. So, however I make my work, you can push past color and find that there's some real honest content there, and it's for everyone.
Yeah.
I just happen in this moment. I'm focusing here towards people of color and giving them something that I didn't necessarily have or didn't know that it was aware. Yeah. I was aware of it when I was deciding to be an artist or going through school. Barclay Hendricks and Kerry James Marshall. I mean, Kerry James is the reason why my figures are Black.
Yeah.
Seeing his show in New York, it blew my mind, and I never saw the Black figure painted that way.
Yeah.
It never made me feel the way it did. And I was like, how do I not do this?
Yeah, and museums need more of that. They need, like, museums are supposed to be for everything and for everybody, and that's something that we do at AEIVA. Birmingham is a predominantly African-American city, so we're very mindful about our visitors. So we try to make, we're free and open to the public, and we try to make everything we do for everybody who comes through our door, no matter what walk of life you come from and where your background is from, any of that. And so we need more artists that are creating a more diverse image of the world, because we don't live in a box. We live in a very culturally diverse world.
I mean, it's tough. I mean, I just did an interview with the Museum of Fine Arts Boston here.
Yeah.
Maybe like a month ago or 2 months ago. I don't really know when it was. But that was one of our questions, and I shared a story when I got into school and I didn't want to go to the museum because every time we had to go there, it felt weird. It felt like I didn't belong, but also there was no record of me.
Yeah.
I didn't go. I didn't see any of that stuff. So that was part of why I make so much work, is I want to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Again, that there'll be plenty of stuff around for young Black people to come in and see themselves.
I love that, and like I said, I think it's very important in the world we live in today. Lavaughan, I want to thank you for your time. I feel like we probably could keep talking for hours about you and your work.
I'm a chatty person, so.
And I hope that one day we get to actually meet it face to face, and not just the ironic face to face. I very much look forward to meeting you in person one day. And again, thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate it. Yeah, as soon as maybe I'll message you when I go to visit my mom.
Definitely.
She's still in Pensacola, so that's not far.
Great. I would love it.
We'll make this Corona thing calm down a little bit.
Exactly. And you can come to Birmingham and we'll give you the grand tour.
I appreciate it. Looking forward to it.